You're listening to Cosmic Consciousness, the show that connects with today's way showers and conscious advocates who use real-life superpowers to catapult human evolution.
Blessings, soul family. This is Jewels with Cosmic Consciousness, coding the new human for the new earth. I'm so excited about our guest today. She is such a sweetie. So we have Lois Hollis. She's an RN, a BSN, and a Reverend. She shifts opinions of one of the most forbidden subjects, shame and guilt. Her passion is to show the way to self-love by eliminating suffering and the shame of guilt. Welcome to the show, Lois. I'm so excited. And so you are a shame guilt educator. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that came about and what that is?
I know, and that's the question. I didn't know there were certain people like you that existed, and I didn't know that either. And it wasn't until 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, that I decided to make shame guilt. I say shame guilt instead of shame and guilt, and I'll explain why later. A topic as its own study, because it's that important. And it's important to us as spiritual leaders and spiritual people along the path. For we are the most susceptible to shame guilt energy than other people who are not on the spiritual path. So I am so grateful, Jules, to let this information seep through and give the people on your podcast and others on the spiritual path an easier way to climb higher on the frequency ladder.
That's so beautiful. And I love how you touched into that a lot of people on a spiritual path are more in tuned with those frequencies. And, you know, shame and guilt are on the lowest.
Yes, frequency. Yes, yes. I was going to bring that in, but you guys are just smart, so I don't have to talk about that. I can talk about what it is from a different approach that you have not heard before.
Because I love that.
God, as you know, I started writing after many spiritual experiences, and that's what God was telling me. And I was just taking dictation from God, which turned out to be 1,000 pages. Anyway, it's slowly making its way. But anyway, that's how I received my information in my own healing. I had a near-death experience when I was child, 7 or 8, not sure. But however, I did not know that until my 40s. I had a very abusive childhood. That's why I had a near death. My neck was broken in many places, and I was smothered, etc. So I went to heaven, and God told me, come back, because I had a mission to do. And I know now, but I did not know then, that I came with 3 beings. And they're the ones that have always been with me. And I didn't really know that until I start giving education about shame and guilt and how it affects our inner personalities. Not you, Jules, but the anger part and the little kid inside of you, the inner critic, etc. And I'm talking as I see them, because I have that gift of sight. And I can see the inner personality parts only when I'm doing session and other visual experiences. And I was giving a lecture, and people were raising their hand. They're saying, Lois, what are you talking about? I said, you know, when you see this and you see that and all that. And they're like, Lois, wait a minute. We don't understand what you're saying. So at age 40, I realized that people don't see what I see. And therefore, I made a DVD of what I see, of inner personality parts talking to each other and talking with me.
Oh, and I love that.
So that started the film making thing. Also, I'm making a film, but that was 8 years ago. And now January, I received funds to make another movie on the exposition of shame and guilt, how we see it, how I see it, and how it interacts with us.
I want to go into this a little bit deeper. Definitely super interesting. But before we do, we're going to go to a break here. Where would people find you, Lois, if they want to know more about you, work with you?
The best way would be my website, Lois, Lois, Hollis, HOLLIS.com. There I have an ebook free, and it's called 500 Questions, One Answer. Now, I give 500 situations of how shame, guilt behavior affects us, because I have learned, and also myself didn't know really what is shame, guilt behavior. I know the feeling, but I don't know what behavior causes that. So I've given 500 examples. Now, you're not going to get 500 ones because I don't want to overload anybody. I have 25 segments coming in 25 parts coming in 20 segments. So there will be like 2 months of it.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, we can talk more about that too. So, and we'll put that link to get a hold of Lois in the script below as well. So we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Don Rekla, Executive Director of Superpower Experts, and we want to thank each of you for making Superpower Up the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. Because people like you have the courage to say that mindfulness, healthy living, disrupting reality, the pursuit of consciousness, responsible entrepreneurship, and radical parenting matter. We now amass over 1 million downloads monthly in more than 90 countries. Our numbers keep growing because there are far more people willing to live divergently than mass media wants to acknowledge. For you, the change makers, the light bearers, the way showers, we say thank you. If you're ready to take the next step in your evolution, go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower Quiz. And as Neva Lee Rekla, our youngest podcaster, likes to remind us, remember, we all have superpowers and we can change the world.
And we're back. I have Lois Hollis with us, and we are talking about shame and guilt. So you were talking about right before the break how you have a couple of movies going, but what really came to me is how you see shame and guilt in the personality. So why don't you go into that just a little bit? What is it that you see?
When it's appropriate, go in session, and I myself had cleared the shame and guilt of what I can. I mean, it's a lifelong process. We cannot say I get rid of all the shame and guilt and we're fine. If that was that easy, we would all be doing the dancing game. Anyway, I see it's almost like a round black speck, like a speck inside of us, Agnes at 6 years old, and there's different names that we can use. We don't have to call ourselves Lois, because I have Agnes inside of me that's 6 years old with the big black part in her arm, and I can see that. And then I can ask the inner critic, do I have permission to remove it? We cannot just remove things. We have to ask the permission of the inner critic, and that's a whole nother story that we have to go into. But that's how I help little Agnes remove the shame and guilt and give it to the universe to recycle. And then she has a higher frequency and she starts healing. Okay, I know we can forgive ourselves for what we have done. We can forgive others for what we have accepted. And that's a very good thing to do. And thinking positive is very good. But that only brings you to first or second base. It does not bring you home. Shame only dissolves in detection. That's the only bad thing it has, is detection. So when we actually see it, the jig's up, so to speak.
I mean, isn't that true with anything as we evolve? If we're not seeing it, then it's hard to create change. And as you were speaking, I had this insight come to me, and it kind of came to me the other day, but as you were talking, I really saw it come in. And it was this, I guess you could just say a few words. It was that no two equals can create change. And what I think is so interesting about that is that shame and guilt are very different frequencies, but they work off of each other. And so together, they can't create change because they're reflecting the same frequency. But if we bring in that place of the awareness, then you have just created two opposites that are able to create, or just things that aren't equal are going to create change. So I want to go into that part just a little bit more because, everybody's asking, well, how do I get rid of this? I know that I feel this way. What do I do to make myself clear shame and guilt?
Okay. I need to backtrack a little. I call shame and guilt shame guilt. Shame operates in the unconscious mind. Guilt is in the conscious mind. Now, this makes us more separated when we try to resolve the shame guilt problem. Shame guilt is an energy. It's same as love, joy, happiness is an energy. One's positive, one's negative. Shame guilt turns our positive emotions into negative emotions. It's like a computer that gets a virus. It acts differently. So we have to understand shame guilt is an energy that affects our emotions. It turns our compassion into depression. It turns our intuition into anxiety. It turns our passion into anger. Shame guilt is the root of all negative emotions. And this is what I became so happy about when I discovered that shame guilt is responsible for all negative feelings. I was so happy because I didn't have to go to therapy for my depression or my anxiety and my anger and my hatred. I was just, oh my God, it's so easy. Okay, it's a process you have to do, but essentially it's doable. It's very doable. And I was so excited 20 years ago. I was like, oh, I want to tell everybody how compact it is. Because I had received patients that had depression for years, and then they did anxiety training and then anger training. And I said, oh my goodness, they're wasting so much time. We need to work on shame guilt. And then those negative feelings lessen. However, the world was not ready 20 years ago to hear Lois talk about shame guilt. They said, can you talk about joy, happiness, and peace? I said, of course I can, but that's not going to get you joy, happiness. Okay, I'll get you there temporarily, but it's not going to move you into a higher consciousness or allow you to move on. But the coronavirus changed everything, and now it's a hot topic. So anyway, now why I said I am so grateful to be here to talk to people on the spiritual path is because people on the spiritual path have more light within them. And shame, guilt, energy uses the light pathways to enter our being.
Oh, gosh, I don't resonate with that. I don't. So I'll let you go on, but I want to interrupt and just be like, yeah, that doesn't resonate with me at all. But I'd love to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, but it's an energy.
Oh, I know.
that operates the same way the light pathways enter. It has, let's say you have a lot of light pathways, then you have the capacity for the shame pathways. It attacks the light. It goes to the light. Anyway.
So I want to just interrupt here because I think maybe we're talking about two different things.
Okay.
So because light frequency for me is a frequency that is existing without space or form. And to be able to have that experience, we have to be at a very high level of consciousness, or we have to be vibrating at a very high frequency. And for myself, when a lower frequency comes in, it's not that I don't notice it, but it's not in the same resonance. So it passes right through. And the only way that I would actually attract that frequency or hold on to that frequency would to be if I lowered my frequency to meet it. And so that's what is I find really interesting is that, and I think that that's how we start to create different realities outside of these lower frequencies, is because we no longer resonate there, and so they can't create form or density in our experience. So that's maybe we're saying something.
Well, I think we're talking about the same thing in different language, which is really great because everyone has their own software.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I did 500 questions, because we are also individual. And that's why shame and guilt has become a monster within us, because we don't know how it affects us personally. And we have to learn that. Anyway, so shame guilt is an energy, and as we can agree on, is that it has a tendency to lower our frequency, because we're trying to come here, and the shame guilt tries to bring us down. So there's that fight. And the reason that culture calls shame and guilt and separate it, because the medical model does that. As a nurse, if you have a virus or bacteria in your brain, you have meningitis. If you have the same bacteria or virus in your lungs, they call it pneumonia. And that goes on. If you have the same in your stomach, they have gastritis. Okay, I'm oversimplifying that, but I'm making an example of why shame, guilt are separate and not one. But if we can make shame, guilt the same energy, we have a different resonance with it, because shame is not bad. And they say shame is bad and guilt is not. It's good, because we need guilt to be moral. And I'm inviting people not to use guilt to be moral, just to do it because it's the right thing to do. Mm. And everyone understands that. So that's where the dichotomy comes in with our cultures, that shame is bad and guilt is good. Neither one is good, because it's the same energy. And that's one factor I want to bring across, because it helps in the healing when you can bring the two together. And people say, oh, I can never get rid of my guilt. And I said, you're correct. We will never get rid of guilt that we carry unless we remove the shame that's causing the guilt.
That makes sense. So let's say somebody comes to you and they're ready to release their shame, guilt. How would you work with them?
I would talk with them and say, how do you feel? And usually there's a negative feeling that comes through. I don't care, or depression, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And then I use that feeling to talk to. Hi, anxiety, how are you? What do you have to say to me? Thank you so much for coming to me. And then we explore that feeling, which tends to be an event in someone's childhood. And in that childhood, we can discover how the shame, guilt came in, and we see the shame, guilt. Can we get rid of it? Okay. And that's it. And that child then heals. When the child heals, we have more energy, we have more health, because we are receiving a 7-year-old's health into our bodies. That's how shame and guilt makes us older. But when we release it, we get our youth back to some degree.
Anytime we release a lower frequency. But what I love is just that place of awareness. I think that's the part that is really resonating with me. And so I'm just having, of course, I'm kind of tuning in and just listening to what the community would like to ask. And so the next question that's coming through is, something happens in our day And all of a sudden it triggers an old guilt pattern. It's not even that maybe they did anything wrong, but something triggered something that created the shame guilt in the past. What would you say? What can you give people today to walk away with that they could do in those moments to help just start to release that, or maybe have more awareness of what it is that they're even releasing?
Okay, if we could shift the opinion, shame, guilt, energy. Shame, guilt is not mine to own or to give. It's outside of me. And then what do you feel? Well, guilt usually makes you, oh, I'm not good enough. But don't write to guilt. I'm not using the word shame, guilt. I'm using the feeling that comes with it. Either depression, my mother said I'm no good, or I'm going to flunk that exam, whatever comes up. And I would suggest at that moment, if possible, because sometimes you're driving a car or changing a baby's diaper. You don't have time to write. But keep it in your mind and shift the opinion from shame, guilt to what am I feeling? I'm feeling no good. So when you can, take pen and pencil and say, hi, I'm no good. Thank you so much for coming to see me. What do you have to tell me? And so explore that feeling. Mm-hmm. And eventually you'll get to the shame, guilt that feeling is carrying, and helping that child or that part of you, or however software you have, to remove the shame, guilt. And the whole purpose is to find the guilt, shame that's locked in to our inner parts of ourself. Now, the inner critic is the shame, guilt producer within us. So that's someone we have to make friends with.
Mm-hmm. Or at least have the awareness of what they're saying to decide whether or not you want to agree with it.
Well, we will disagree, but that's where ambassadorship comes in. Hi, I'm Lois. Well, hi, you stupid thing. You can't do anything right. Okay, that's your opinion, but we need to talk, because the inner critic only has shame, guilt as its tool. So we have to educate the inner critic. Hi, how are you? I'm Lois. It's the year 2020. We're not in 1960 anymore. I'm not a little kid. I can tell you what I can do and what I can't do. I am not blanket no good. So we have to talk. So it's a talking that we arrange like a friend. We get to know each other, and eventually the inner critic does turn around. But it's a matter of ambassadorship.
I love how you said it's like talking to a friend, because I think there's a lot of value in that when we can start to question thoughts that we have as if we're questioning a friend, of like, oh, well, why do you feel that way? Or is that even true? And we start to kind of
investigate. Very good. Very well said. And you have to be like a detective. But the best book you can read is the one you write by talking within yourself.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to kind of separate, okay, who here is what you're calling the ambassador, and then who here is just the chatter, and then starting to create a dialogue between the two brings awareness, but it also allows us to move kind of more into the conscious part of our brain, where we can start to make choices outside the story of the critic.
We are bringing our conscious, unconscious, conscious by doing this.
I love that.
That's what we're doing. And the inner critic stands between the conscious and the unconscious, like this. And he will let you know when he feels it's ready. So you want to talk to the big guy. You want to talk to the inner critic and say, hi, how are you? It's 2020. But no one told him that. He's living in the year that you were 2 and 3 years old. And he's living with the culture and the church and the school, what taught him. So he's not a bad guy. Mm-hmm. He's just giving you what he was given. That's all. And then you have to re-educate him like we're re-educating ourselves.
I love that. That's what I call it, reprogramming. It's
Exactly.
that was programmed.
Yes, exactly. Great word. Great word. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well, I love that. So is there a short little process there, some sort of, I don't know. Oh, I know everyone's like, do this. So let's do kind of a group process for something that you see in a lot of people, because I mean, humans are humans. So an inner critic or a program is how I would say it, that a lot of people have, and do just like a short little process where everyone can kind of experience a clearing. Can you do that? Like,
yes, I can.
okay,
And before I forget, I have a DVD, and we'll have to put that in there. And that actually shows, I have kid actors as a personality, so it will definitely help you connect with yourself. So I can tell you some of myself. And the inner critic, me, was called the king. And that's in the DVD. And the king says, and who are you? Because I come to say, hi, how are you? And you're going like Dorothy going to the Wizard of Oz, like, really you're scared and scared and scared. And so he said, you don't touch those emotions because I take care of them. I tell them what to do because you gave them up. And that's true. As a little kid, we didn't know. We didn't know anything like that. We were just copying what our culture was teaching us. So I see the inner critic as a person that's monitoring us all the time. And he's very exhausted. He doesn't want to do this job either. But he's too narcissistic not to. One time that I got in touch with a part of me, depression, her name was Lois Hollis. And she came in like this. And she said, this is my one last breath. And she said to me, are you the one to love me? Well, I cried. How could you not cry?
right.
And she stuttered. And I did stutter when I was younger because I had severe dyslexia and a lot of brain traumas. And I was able to revisit that. It took a little while, but that shows you how kind and sweet and lovable all of our parts are. And they just got turned around by shame, guilt. Are you the one to love me?
Well, I say that we all give ourselves a hug right now.
Yes.
And say, yes, I love you.
I am the one to love you. I think that might be the one, something to say. I am the one to love you.
Or just, I am love. I am. It's just, that is what my essence is.
Mm-hmm. And it circulates to all of me. All of me. And I can feel the inner critic said, well, I don't want that love stuff. Look what it turned you into. A whiny thing. And that's what I hear in my head. And I would say, you may think of it that way, but being sensitive is a very, very wonderful gift to have. And that's what I have learned after I did the shame guilt information, is that people say, oh, Lois, you're too sensitive. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. And I would feel so bad all the time about that. And now I had to say, oh, thank you so much for the compliment. Mm. It makes me a better person. And my health is better because I'm very sensitive.
And I know there's a lot of sensitive people out there listening, a lot of empaths, and and as we evolve as human evolution, mm-hmm. that is a huge part that comes in, is our sensitivities, and it is a gift.
And I tell people, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am so happy I'm sensitive. It's such a gift from God. And people look at me like, what? And they have no comment after that. So they don't shame you anymore. It's awesome. I love it. I wish I knew that 20 years ago. And after I learned about shame and guilt, I was actually dancing because I said, I don't have to be hurt anymore. I don't have to be hurt anymore. It's not, I understand shame, guilt's an energy. It just comes in. It's not me. Shame, guilt is not me. It's an energy. I don't have to be hurt anymore. I was so happy because I was always being hurt.
That.
It was always hurt because I'm so sensitive. I'm just hurt and hurt and hurt. And then the more you hurt, they go, oh, we can get her. Because people with shame, guilt, they're sort of magnetized and give it to you because it just happens. And the people have to get rid of shame because they feel better. Like when someone yells at you, they feel better. But all they're doing is dumping shame, guilt on you. And then when you become aware of that, you can actually see it and you go, I give you back the shame and guilt. Or you can say, I don't take that. Thank you very much.
One thing that you said that I want to go back and just kind of highlight is that the shame or the feeling or the shame, guilt, whatever it is I love how you said it's an energy, but I think that everybody kind of gets that. But the part that I feel that a lot of people don't stop to think about is that the feeling isn't you. It's just a feeling, because I think so many times we identify ourselves in a feeling that it becomes like an identity, and that's really why it's harder to let go of, because once we identify with it, it becomes a part of us, and then it's harder to let go. So I loved that part of your little song that you did.
Yes, and depression, anxiety is part of us because it's our emotion that just got turned around because of shame, guilt, energy. Like a computer has a virus, it doesn't act properly. Shame, guilt is the virus that comes into our humanness and offsets our emotions. So we are not, shame, guilt's our enemy. The church is not, our mother is not, our grandmother. Nobody is giving us a problem. Shame, guilt is, and the shame, guilt of our mother or our father or our grandmother. And it puts you in a better place because you know your beautiful humanness. And you are beautiful, and you're glorious, and we're evolving. And shame, guilt brings us into our lower frequency of negativity. And when we see it, we just go, we don't want that. Bye.
So we look at it, we talk to it, and we let the ambassador come in, and you have this conversation. And well, first of all, let's just put all the conversation apart. The longer we have a conversation with the critic that you're talking about, the more we are moving into the conscious part of the brain where we can start to create choices from that higher frequency. And when it all comes down to it, that's something that we don't have to stop and write out. We can just start to question that inner critic. So if there is anything that I would just hope that people that are listening is, whether or not you go and write anything down, just start questioning the inner critic and start to have a conversation with it.
Have a friendly conversation. When the inner critic, George or Steve or King or whatever, he will name himself. You cannot name him. You ask him his name. It was very narcissistic when we name people. So we asked him, what is your name? When he or she evolves, then we can evolve higher. He's holding us down because that's his job. He's supposed to hold us down so we don't get hurt. Now that we know we're sensitive, we can say, hi, I'm sensitive. It's okay. He doesn't have to hold us down anymore.
That's beautiful. Well, Lois, we're almost out of time. So let's have you say again, if somebody wanted to do some work with you, where would they go?
Lois, Lois, Hollis, HOLLIS.com. And I have a free 15-minute talk that we can just talk about self. And if you want to have a session, you can always talk to me first, and that's fine. And please if anything, please get my book because it is so enlightening.
Beautiful. And I love how, I don't know if we said this before the call, or if we said it on the podcast, but that this was a channel, like this is the divine moving through you, and all your work is coming from that place. And I think that's just really special. And that's what we all are here to do, is to allow the divine to flow through us. So thank you for expressing the divine in your own unique way. And it's just been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, listeners.
Yes, thank you, everyone that is listening. Thank you for being part of Cosmic Consciousness and the Super Power Up community. And we are sending you all so much love and a great big hug. And Lois has one more thing she wants to say.
Thank you for hosting this interview. I am, with the show notes, I am sending you a PDF of my latest pamphlet of light language that I have received from Spirit. It's about 30 pages. So thank you. And you can share that as you wish.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, honey. And until we meet again, go and live to your highest potential.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the superpower quiz today.